questions and answers, and an unsolicited opinion. Were thumb drives found in the Mandalay Bay from Stephen Paddock, etc., ad nauseam catatorium? Didn't see any listings of them, but then again, I really wasn't looking. I was only asked about the missing hard drive, and finding out that one of the laptops that was there had a hard drive that, unless you knew what you're looking at, you wouldn't notice it was a hard drive, because it's a memory stick this long as a hard drive. M2 solid state. What is the benefit of operating off a thumb drive? Thumb drive and solid state drives have higher speed access depending on whether they're connected to something fast. Number one. Number two, the real benefit is that you normally set up an operating system to run from one in such a way that it does the least amount of rewrites to itself, which means it won't wear itself out. Whether it's a solid state drive or a thumb drive, you configure it not to leave a bunch of junk on the machine. Also, if you want to erase one, because it's a solid state based piece of equipment, even if it's an external thumb drive, it can be told to erase itself, if it's the proper one, fast. You can either start it with an encrypted status, which means all you have to do is scramble the one half the encryption data, which is on it. It has its own internal password and your external one you type in, and it's effectively unretrievable because it really is hard to retrieve. Second, you can tell these things if it's configured to act as a real hard drive and have all the features. It has an internal wipe command. Next feature is, well, in this case, what they found is a broken laptop there, and odds are you took the hard drive home and just plugged it into something. Neat feature is you can plug it into an external supply in an external case, plug in your connector, give it a command and tell it to erase itself, yank the plug, and it'll keep erasing itself until it's done, even if you're not in the room. It just needs power. That's how they're set up these days. So the main advantage over a standard hard drive is speed, and in the case of a thumb drive, ease of disposal. I have a thumb drive adapter about that big that has a micro SD card that's almost as thin as paper and less than half an inch across. And breaking one of those things consists of just sticking it in a coffee grinder or just dropping it somewhere. It's small enough people won't find it. If you poke a hole in the ground more than 3 inches deep and drop it in there, people won't locate it. It doesn't show up on metal detectors half the time either. So there's a lot of advantages to it. But the main one is you can set up an operating system on one where it won't leave any information anywhere at all. Secure Linux comes to mind immediately. Next, someone has a video, and I'm making a joke about the channel's assertion. The scary reason utility poles are so tall. And I was going to make a pole joke and pole dancer joke and pole worker, and anyway, utility poles have branding on them. Sometimes it has GPS locations or XY coordinates, but the main reason they're a certain height is to satisfy requirements for height, clearance requirements. They're also treated to refusal, meaning they're given enough compound to make them to where that they're less likely to rot or get bugs in them until they can't take any more. So they're a continuous source of something that may be toxic in the area. In 1844, before military tanks ever existed or any other requirement based on any mechanics, the first poles were requested by Mr. Morse to do the Morse code telegraph system to be 24 to 30 feet in length, no less than 8 inches in diameter at the butt, tapering to 6 or 5 inches at the top. I'll include a link to a video on how telephone poles are made. They have to be fairly consistent, mainly for mechanical strength. They're put 6 feet in the ground out of 30 to 24 feet. So obviously at that point, 24 feet above the ground or less at the time. The minimum height in some parts of Australia is listed at 5.5 meters over the street and 3 meters over any driveway concerning any maximum height item, and that's for conventional power lines that are 220 or 440, that sort of thing. Single phase, nothing unusual. A standard U.S. utility pole is now 40 feet tall and 6 feet buried in the ground. The maximum height of a wooden pylon is limited to approximately 30 meters or almost 100 feet because of the limited height of available trees. We call them pecker poles or pole pigs. Or pull a rabbit out of a hat. They're limited only to carrying voltage from anywhere from 30,000 volts to 300,000 volts depending on dryness of the area. The main thing and they last from 25 to 35 years approximately, maybe even 40 or 50 on average. Main problem is rot out at the base due to the ground lead, chemically encouraging leaching. An 11-foot tall tank anywhere in North America would have no trouble getting underneath any of these. It's the height of the cabling. The other thing is, there's underground distribution lines being increasingly used as an alternative to utility poles, which was rejected by Morse because all he could do was rubber and lead shielding, which didn't work out well. In residential neighborhoods especially here, and cities and towns. These cities and towns charge a use fee to any network that wants to put an antenna on them or any cabling, because technically the city and county effectively have to maintain the poles unless they do a contract. It's based on the surface area they take up, 1 square foot approximately or so per pole, being leased or rented by the city, because the city and county have to have sovereign control over those poles. So your 5G data network companies and wireless carriers often have to rent the pole space that would normally be carried by power lines. Cable, telephone, datacom, competition. Do you allow competitors to be on the same pole? This is the same problem that happens on a tall building for doing cell sites or just data communication. Every square inch matters. But these are low to the ground and use much higher frequency with a very, very short range. Every pole would be needed at every intersection, like there and down there. You need one in the middle of the block to get good coverage and make it clean without having too much walkover, which means the closer they are together, the lower the power has to be so they don't interfere with each other. And they'll even have antennas and antenna horns to feed and control. Now, why am I bringing this up? I'm going to include all of this in the title of the video, so you find this. The main reason for the height of the poles is how tall the trees are. And the main reason for the height of the wires is whatever the heck is going under them. Stagecoaches, taxis, double-decker buses. And the main reason that people don't like them is because they are a blight on the environment. So you may have noticed in many areas when they have telephone poles, they deliberately plant trees so you don't see the cables as much, which then limits how much power they can carry at voltage max. So why is someone, John X Army, talking about the real reason, the scary reason, poles are getting taller? It's because we're carrying more crap on them and using higher voltages in some areas. But it was an interesting question, and he also said that he was kind of messing with people and trolling a little bit. But he got asked about it a lot. I tried looking it up and could find 0% instances of anybody concerned about how tall telephone poles are anywhere. I think this is a drop bet. So anyway, to review the view. Thumb drives, I don't think were found at the Mandalay Bay. They would be used for temporary data, and he would have taken them home or thrown them out of a car while driving down the road. It's really easy to get rid of them. People don't pay attention to them, even if you rip them apart. And I'll even do a video on how to properly and really erase one. Yes, it involves a hammer or a blowtorch. What's the benefit of booting off a thumb drive? You have to configure it on purpose to do the least amount of rewriting on the drive so it will retain only things you tell it to do so, unless you, and the thing is that most people don't know how to do this, so you just download a thumb drive based op system like a Linux distro. And as opposed to a standard hard drive or hard drive setup, it's always treated as an external item, so you can always just dump data on it, and it's easier to dispose of, especially if you use a USB 3 to micro SD card, high-speed one. It will really make it to where it's easy. Just pop this out. This is what carries the data, and snap it in half. Or what persons who know what they're doing do is put it on top of a lighter with a little metal cage and light it on fire, and literally roast it. As the heat gets above a certain point, it erases it completely, and then it makes it easy to crush. And yes, that's literally the only way you can get those damn chips to really blank, unless you can properly race them with the automated routine on a solid-state hard drive anyway, and tell it to erase itself, and then go through and write a unique pattern to it that fills up the whole thing and confirm it wrote it to it. And telephone poles, as we know them in North America, have been around since 1844, and they were set by limit of what trees they could get at minimum to put cables up for communication. And now they carry telephone, telecom, power, hydroelectric power, telegraph, and data communications hookups, and also act as antenna postings. And it's mostly to keep them insulated and out of the way, so that you could use bare wire if necessary on low wires, and on high voltage wires much higher, so you wouldn't have to worry about them touching each other or anything else. And they are gradated by voltage. You can look up the limits and rules. And in Australia, they have a limit of down to like 3 meters right next to the ground, because, you know, Australia. And All the other data is below, so reviewing all of it is worthless, but it has nothing to do with military tank heights, and this is a lot like tacho marks on the back of signs. Those aren't tacho marks. They're approval labels saying it was put up on a certain date and they followed a certain rule. I'll look up that if you want, but you can look that up quickly too. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a good day, good luck with that, and that was me babbling for 10 minutes and 20 seconds. Bye.